Hi, I'm Sabine, the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. It really goes a long way. It helps us spread the good word. And if you or anybody you know is in the market for legacy or estate planning or business or trademarks, please reach out to our firm. It's the Ambitious Legacy Firm. We are licensed in New York and New Jersey, but we have service partners in all states. So we'd love to work with you. Asset protection, legacy planning, trademarks. We got you. All right. So it's the ambitiouslegacyfirm.com. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine, the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening and thank you for helping me be on purpose. So today, guys, I have a bit of a confession. I did a Reels earlier this week about Chadwick Boseman's estate. And to be honest, I was wrong. I got caught up in the hype with all of, the news and information that was out there. But the good thing is I did say that I was going to take a look and break it down here on the podcast today. So that's what we're going to do today. So the media, as they do, hyped up the case a bit, and which is understandable. That's their job, right? To get you to go and click and view and get your emotions going. But nonetheless, it is great information for us to kind of discuss and helps to highlight a lot of the situations and issues that people find themselves in with this type of process, this probate process when people die without proper or adequate planning, right? And so one of the things that were said in many of the articles, like a lot of news outlets covered it, but they kind of had the similar information, right? So many of the things that were said was that there was a settlement of the estate, right? So the estate settled and the wife and the parents agreed to, split the $2.3 million, right? Another thing that was sort of, well, let's deal with that first, right? So that is not exactly true. When I took a look at the court documents and when I took a look at California law, because many of you know I'm based out of New York and New Jersey, so taking a look at California law, I realized that wasn't exactly true. It wasn't that the wife agreed to split the estate with the parents. It's that the way California law is set up, if you pass away without a will, without a trust, or any sort of planning documents that say otherwise, then what they're going to do is go by their intestacy laws. And the state intestacy laws are basically the state's plan for you, right? I may have touched this in different episodes. So the state's plan for you, they just kind of take a guess as to what they think most people would actually want. So they come up with this boilerplate plan, and that's how it kind of works. And they just go down the line to see which next of kin is actually going to be the one that's going to benefit from the estate. So in Chadwick's situation, because he had a spouse but no children, so California says, okay, if you only have a spouse, then everything goes to your spouse, right? They have a separation between community property, which is a property that you get during the marriage. So whatever we get during the marriage is ours, right? We talked about this with prenups and stuff, that you have to actually put that in place if you want something different. And so they have community property, and then they have the separate property. And so the separate property is, what was actually just yours, which would have been before the marriage. So California says, if you only have a spouse, then we're just going to give everything to your spouse, whatever it is. If you have, actually, that's not true. If you have a spouse and no parents, right? If you have children, then your children inherit all the community property and separate property. If it's only children and no spouse, right? If you have spouse and parents, which is the situation in Chadwick's case, then your spouse and parents actually share. So the spouse inherits all of the community property, right? So if we own the community property 50-50, the surviving spouse gets all of it, right? Whatever you got during the marriage. Now, whatever you had as separate property, that is going to be split half with the spouse and half with the parents, right? So that's why the assets were actually split in court. So we don't know if there was any community property that the wife was only entitled to if she actually decided to share that with the parents, because that's something they could have settled, right? But what really happened is, she filed the the probate case. She opened his estate. And I should make a clarification there because some states just call it probate and some states have a distinction where it's administration if you die without a will, or it's probate if you die with a will. So in this case, he died without a will, so technically it wouldn't be probate. But we're just going to use that terminology because it seems to be, the terminology that everyone sort of is understanding. And they're similar processes anyway, so it's fine. Okay, so lost my train of thought. All right. All right. So now this is why the assets were split. Not so much that the wife was being super generous and conscious of that, but one of the things that she did do that I found in the documents is that she did say that she didn't want to get paid for being the executor of the estate or administering the estate. And so typically there is a by statute amount that you can get paid if there's no document that says otherwise. Right. So like if you have a will or a trust, you can kind of say like, the person who's going to be in charge is not getting paid, or you could set a higher amount or, whatever it is. But if it's silent, like in his case where there wasn't a plan, it's going to be statutorily. So she said, no, it's okay. I don't need to get paid. She's benefiting from the estate anyway, but that would have come off the top, right? So she would have gotten, I guess, a little bit more, but for doing the legwork. And it seemed like because of the period of time, I know I'm saying it's 2 years since he passed away, and she filed the estate like shortly after, like 6 weeks after. Although it's been it seems like a long time to some, but that's actually pretty quick for somebody of his caliber, in the sense that he has all of these assets that come in periodically, like royalties and things that are going to continue to probably bring in assets for him, because that usually takes time to value and assess and things of that nature as it pertains to taxes, as it pertains to what the beneficiaries are going to get. It can take a lot longer than that, but this was fairly quick, and it seemed like it was fairly simple for the wife to be able to locate assets. So what I will say is I think that they probably had some good communication in terms of what to do. Even though there wasn't a will in place, they probably had really good communication about where the assets were, like what insurance policies he may have had or may not have had, or what accounts, or who to talk to discover all this information. And that's what it's seeming like from looking from the court documents, that she was able to locate quite a bit of assets. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's all that there was, right? So another thing that a lot of the media outlets were talking about is that his estate was $3.8 million. And when I had posted on Instagram, I got a lot of comments and people were like saying, oh my God, how come his estate was only $3.8 million? And at first I was like, well, this was like his breakout role. Black Panther was sort of his breakout role. And although he was doing a lot of things after that, he didn't really get to be recognized and acknowledged as much as he probably would have, right, had he been around. However, what I realized after I took a beat to think about it, and then after looking over everything, I realized, that may not have been all of his assets, right? Because what we're looking at in this case and in the court documents is his probate assets. So the probate assets are assets that are going to go through the court system. But there are certain assets that don't go through the court system, even if you did no planning other than selecting a beneficiary. So we kind of talked about this sometimes, but for some of you guys who haven't heard this, assets such as your life insurance policies. If you put a beneficiary on your life insurance policy, then it does not go through the court system. But if you fail to do so, it will go through the court system, right? But that is a form of planning that you could do to sort of have the power have the power to simply just fill out a form and change that beneficiary. So your life insurance, your investment accounts, you could do that with retirement accounts. So certain accounts do not have to go through the probate system. Even your bank accounts, you can set up to be payable on death, where you can just have those assets go to your loved ones, and it could bypass the court system as well. And we want to keep in mind, if there is no planning in place and someone actually needs to have liquidity or to have assets to help maybe pay for funeral expenses. Not everybody has $10, $15, $20,000 to do that, like right off the bat. To care for young children. If somebody is, there's a special needs individual in your life that is benefiting or dependent on you, they may need care to be continued. So those type of things are good because it's quick, especially insurance. Insurance is like almost instantaneous. I like to tell people, literally, the minute you get a death certificate, send it to the insurance company. If you're the beneficiary, no question asked, they give it to you. Of course, you need to know where the insurance policy is, right? So in his case, and looking through the documents, although so what we're seeing in the court cases, the $3.8 million is whatever was part of his probate estate. So there may be more, and in fact, there probably is more because within his court documents, he had like $230,000 worth of checks that weren't cash, and a lot of the articles talk about that as well. So he's getting money, right? And in the accounting, which is actually what was filed, that sparked this big news that his estate was settled. It shows that he's still getting checks, like he's gotten royalty checks from like Disney, from like Screen Actors Guild, some other checks that he's received throughout this period of time. So it's likely that his estate is more than what this court case is. But the good thing is, for those items, he must have had either a beneficiary designation or he could have had a trust that we don't know about, only because trusts are private, right? So we don't get to see all of this information and be in the business because trusts are private. They do not have to be filed with the court, and even if there's some sort of fighting going on, parts of the trust could be disclosed, but generally you're not going to have a whole entire trust, just in the court system where you could go and look it up and find out all this juicy information, right? Because I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want us to know, how much, like he got a $7,000 check here, a $2,500 check there. There were things like different bills that, or debts that he owed. There was something in particular that I saw that's escaping me now. Medical bills. So he had medical bills that were owed, and things of that nature. And so I'm pretty sure that these are not some sort of things that he'd want to be public, but because the plan wasn't, proper and or non-existent, this is actually, what happened. And so another thing that was stated in a lot of the articles was that, because of not having a proper plan, he actually $1.5 million worth of his estate went to court and legal fees. And so that wasn't exactly accurate, which I was happy to hear, actually, because of the fact that there was a bond that needed to be posted. And so what does that mean, right? So when you have, typically, unless you have a legal document that says otherwise, a bond is required when someone is probating or administering a estate, right? And also states vary on this, so it may not be every single state requires it. They may have different stipulations as to when they require it. But generally what they're trying to do is just make sure that whatever funds are in the estate, the person who's going to be appointed to distribute and do all the legwork like his wife had to do, that they're not going to run off with the funds or they're not going to waste the funds or steal the funds, because that belongs to the beneficiaries, right? Which she happens to be a part of, but she's not the sole beneficiary. And so the bond is sort of like, I always bring up like bail bonds because people kind of are familiar with that process. So it's kind of like an insurance. So the bond company says, if you put this amount of money down, then we'll cover, up to this amount. Like, because you know how you pay less for an insurance policy for a larger death benefit? That's what it is. So the bond cost was really around $2,500. It was a $900,000 bond. And so those funds will not be removed from the estate. It may be held, for whatever period of time, but it's not going to be removed. So essentially it didn't really cost them that much money. However, what they did pay in legal fees was about $50,000 in legal fees and about $12,000 in court fees. So that's a significant amount of money. That's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, if you have $3.8 million, maybe you're not crying over it, but I'm pretty sure, someone else could have used those funds. Those funds will definitely, that's a significant amount of money where you could invest and reap some good returns off of. So although it wasn't significant in his case because of the fact that the family was not fighting. So I think I might have said that in on the Instagram. There was no fighting with the family. So I'm okay to stand corrected, right, when I'm wrong. And so it went as quickly as it could possibly go because they were on one accord, right? There was nothing really no issues there. She was legally his wife, that was not an issue. The courts accepted that, as well as, his parents were in position. So the wife got half, the parents each got a quarter. Not sure if they're married or divorced or what have you, but they each got their own share of his estate. So yeah, $62,000 in legal and court fees is really what was paid. But think about some of these other cases where it's gone on for years. Like if they really wanted to say, like for instance, in James Brown case, he had a child that was questionable as to whether, or maybe several children. So his case took about 15 years to go through the process, and with his matter, a significant amount of time was taken just to determine if the children were actually his children, right? So and that was because the family members were contesting that those were actually his children. And so the courts had to, do their due diligence based on that. However, so if in this case there was something of that sort, or there was an issue with whether the wife was the wife, because there was also that issue in James Brown case, they had all these side trials about whether the wife was actually the wife. So those type of hairy things can kind of come up and make it a lot longer. So that $50,000 over 2 years, where not a lot was really needed to be done, could have grown to a lot more, right? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the legal fees and the court fees, which may not have been that detrimental, but significant. We're talking about the amount of time that it has taken. So the wife has lost her husband, and now she's, having to go through this whole entire process for the past 2 years to settle his estate, which, I don't know, maybe she has the time and energy, but I don't think that's anything to sort of sneeze at, losing your spouse. I'm pretty sure that's a pretty significant thing that needs to be healed from, right? And so she's now having to deal with this. So I say that to say, if his plan was a little bit tighter, or if the plan was more robust, because again, we don't know if there was a trust or what else he had outside of this estate, then these type of things could be avoided. And think about it. His parents don't live in the state, right? In California. So now if his wife wasn't around and his parents were the only next of kin, now they would have either had to hire someone over here to do all of that, or to come over here and do all of that. And now, are they in a state mentally, physically, or what have you, to be able to go through all of this in terms of maybe being savvy? So the less the executor could do, perhaps someone else would have had to been put in place to cover all of these costs. Been put in place to do all the legwork, and that would have increased all of the costs within his estate, right? And then the legal fees for the attorneys, actually, they have it on like a graduated scale. So depending on how much the estate is, that's how their fees are sort of based, and they have to, justify their fees as well. So that actually makes a lot more sense, and actually answers a lot of the questions that people were asking. Some people were saying in the post, why is it that his parents are getting something? He was married. Shouldn't his wife get everything? And different states do different things. Like, for instance, in New York, they won't go to your parents if you have a spouse. Your spouse will just get everything. And if you have a spouse and children, they'll split it between your spouse and your children. Your spouse will probably get a little bit more. than the children. So it depends. And this is another reason why you want to be the decision maker as to how things will go. Because oftentimes when I do planning for clients, they want their spouse to get everything at first, at least, right? They don't want to now take away assets from their spouse while their spouse is already is still alive and give it to their children, especially if you have children outside of the marriage, because or prior to the marriage, because if you don't make a plan, the courts is going to basically say, okay, the wife, you get X amount, then you get half of the rest, and then you basically you're splitting it. So now, what if that asset that needs to be split are hard assets? Maybe it's multiple real estate properties, and the kids are like, I want them sold, because we want our portion, and then the wife is sort of like displaced, or it just creates a lot of uprooting, right? And so if you want something different than that, then you have to really put a plan in place, and as opposed to what your state has in store for you. And you want to get to know, what does my state do, right? If something were to happen to me. These are things that you could actually Google. Each state has like their probate and their intestacy like rules online. So it's very easy to understand. Like, just go to your state's, it may be a surrogate's court or their Supreme Court, or their, it depends on what different states have a different hierarchy of their court system, but you can Google it and fairly easily find it and know, what does your state do? And is that okay with you, right? So I tend to say, if you don't like the court system, you don't like the probate process, then you want to think about incorporating a trust into your estate if it makes sense financially for your estate, and based on like your circumstances. You have small children, you have you want your plan to really last longer or have more control, longevity, as to how your assets are distributed and how they're, how you're going to use them to impact. A trust is a good tool for that. Is it for everybody? Absolutely not. Maybe you're okay with the probate process. Maybe it's not that difficult. And also, every state has like what's called like a small estate process, where small estate or simple estate, or whatever the case is, if it's typically under 50,000, sometimes under 30,000, you can kind of get a fast track and you don't have to go through all of the steps. And that may be good enough for you or your loved ones. And if you don't fall into that bracket, then, okay, you have to say, is the probate, this lengthy probate process, is that okay with me? And if not, then you want to think about something more sophisticated, like a trust. There is no one size fits all. I tell you guys this all the time. So you want to make sure that, you're getting your particular situation considered. One of the other things that I thought was a good talking point for this is that he had a business entity, and within his business entity was left as well, and that ended up as part of that amount for his estate. And it went through the probate process because it wasn't if he did have another planning document, it wasn't there, and there was no will to cover it. And so it's important, people are creating businesses now at 18, right? Like, there are so many young people who have businesses, and, on and on and on. Doesn't have to be young people, but you have to consider, like, if your business is a business that is going to be providing continual income, if it's something that's going to live on past you, then what is the plan for that entity, right? Somebody has to be put in charge of that business. Somebody has to continue to run it, continue to collect the checks, continue to conduct business. And if you don't have something in place, so what's going to happen? So within these documents, I don't know if within his business documents, his wife has any authority over his business, or if there is somebody else, or if he has a partner or something like that who can continue to run it. But if he didn't, like with his estate, he's going to continue to get royalty checks. And there's still business opportunities because he did leave not only financial legacy, but he left an impact, right? And I believe, from what I understand of the person who he was, that he has, a lot of social causes that he was interested in furthering or pursuing, or that he was, a part of. So those are the types of things that his business, even though it was, a business that was pretty much his name, this is something that's going to continue to go. This is something that's going to continue to build revenue and income. It's an income stream. So the thing to do when it comes to having a business is, one, to make sure that you do have a plan in place. So whether it be a trust or a will, if that suits you better, but you have direction as to who is going to take over this business and be in place. And there also is such a thing called succession planning, where you actually, on the end of the business, you have it documented within the business, either bylaws or operating agreement, what happens when someone passes away? Who takes over? How do we determine who takes over? Is there insurance to basically allow the business to buy out the family members that are going to be there? Is there insurance on the person's life that's going to now fund the business, right? And allow the business to do things that it needs to do. So there's a bunch of things that could be done. There was like a lot of information here. It was like very juicy. I don't want to sort of belabor it, but there was a lot of things that could have been done differently. But at the end of the day, I'm happy to say and happy to hear that it wasn't as bad as we thought, right? And just for everyone else who is either in this position or has the opportunity to plan, you could see how, things may not go exactly as you would think, right? Because so many people were surprised as to how things went. But you get to decide. You're empowered to make a decision for yourself, for your family, for your legacy, and to impact things that you would have wanted to impact. I always every time I hear one of these things, I think about Prince. I did a episode on Prince, I believe, and he just had so much assets, and he was so private with his life, and he was so passionate about the arts and, things of that nature, and his hometown. And, from what I hear, what people say about him, and, just that was a missed opportunity to make a huge impact on future lives, whether it be his family or just others, people like him or from where he was, or people who could benefit from opportunities that he had or wish he had. So, you get to decide. It's your legacy. What are you going to do with it? Thank you guys for listening to this episode. I hope it was, I hope that it was helpful to you. I hope you got a lot of gems out of it, and I'll see you next time.